Everyone, thank you for being here. We are hoping to share a little bit about the ordinance that's coming up at Monday's meeting, O-2184. This is going to be the proposal for how to spend, if we choose to, the gross receipts tax revenue bonds using a refinancing that's available to us. So I wanted to try to do a little bit of what I'm going to call myth busting at this point in time. And we have several people here that are going to share why we think this is beneficial for not only just certain areas of the city, but the entire city. So I want to start with my idea. This came to me when just a few months ago we were all talking about and learning about the idea of $50 million being proposed for a potential soccer stadium using these same funds. And at that point in time, I was learning about it, and I realized that ended up getting my wheels turning. How can I get funding for the long-awaited North Domingo Baca Aquatic Center? And how can I find a way to make this work to benefit my district? But then that created a new idea, right? How do we make sure that we help out Albuquerque? How do we make sure that we get the jobs done that we were elected to do, that the community has been asking for? And it dawned on me that we needed to wait to find out what the public wanted to say about the $50 million. And then after that, decide how we wanted to proceed. Being that the voters decided not to use this $50 million for the soccer stadium at this point in time, I became aware that we had up to $110 million because of the current interest rates that are existing. So I think that's a really key point there. Because of our current interest rates, we can refinance the bonds that we have without raising taxes and without increasing payments or the duration of our payments while getting projects done throughout our city. This is not a money grab. This is not something that we are trying to do in a backdoor deal, trying to make things happen. We want to make sure that things fall into one of three categories, if not more than that. This would be getting projects done throughout the city, making sure that they will have the potential to reduce crime in the city, and making sure that they have the potential to reduce homelessness in the city, which are three things that our community has been asking for many, many years. So the numbers have increased because interest rates continue to be favorable, and we will have the Director of Finance talk to us about that here in a little bit. But it's not that we are secretly increasing the dollar amount that taxpayers are not aware of. Public input has been given for almost every single project that is on this list because they are on our priorities list. They're on our capital implementation plan. Councilors have gone to the state. The administration has gone to the state to lobby for some of the funding for this. And so this is not surprise attacks in all avenues. It's hard for me to imagine us going to the state to ask for capital outlay funding if we're not willing to use the local funding available to us using our Albuquerque resources. So I think it's important that we prioritize using our tax base, again without raising taxes, without increasing payments or the duration of these, and getting projects done throughout our city. The one thing I want to tell you before I introduce the next guest is I want to really simplify this process because I think that it makes it very difficult for people to understand. But if you have a mortgage and the interest rates on that mortgage go down enough that they become favorable to you, you typically go and you refinance your home. Then in that refinance, you can go ahead and maximize the capacity available, keeping the same payments for the same amount of time that you would otherwise be making them, and you can remodel your entire home. This is what we are suggesting to do using this funding. So it's a really, really big house that we want to remodel for the entire city of Albuquerque. With that, I would like to introduce the co-sponsor to this ordinance, Councilor Clarissa Pena, to share her thoughts on where we came from and why we're doing this.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. I think I'll start with, I don't want to reiterate everything that she said, but I just really wanted to say that I think this is a unique opportunity. You know, this last bond election failed, and the voters were real clear on what they wanted us to address as a city and they really talked about during this whole entire process about homelessness and about public safety. So when Councillor Bassan, contrary to what some things that have been said, is that Councillor Bassan is actually, usually this comes from the administration and it gets sent down to the council. Councillor Bassan, we had a discussion and it came from her, and she said, you know what we really need to do is we need to really address the issues that the community wanted us to, which I just stated. And when she said that, and then we need to look at projects that we have in the hopper and make sure that we complete some projects and look at the ones that have the potential of being completed or almost completed. And with the partnerships that we have at the state, we have a representative here, with the partnerships that we have at the state, that we could actually maybe finish some of these large projects that we have in the community. So with that, you know, I think just bringing this unique opportunity forward, and kind of the main thing that Councillor Bassan talked about is that right now, if we wait till, this isn't about the current council, it's not about rushing anything through. As Councillor Bassan stated, these are priorities that we've had here at the city for the most part. But with interest rates the way they are now, this gives us that opportunity to make sure that we are fiscally responsible with the money. And then also, as you know, with the economy and the rising cost of construction, what we spend now, if we do wait, we have the potential of the interest rates increasing, and then the cost of construction is going to go up. So what we spend $110 million now, and if we wait and spend $110 million later with rising interest rates and the cost of construction, we could be doing $60 million worth of projects rather than a larger amount. So, you know, I just again want to say that this is a really unique opportunity. It's right before the session. I know a lot of our legislators are looking at this as what they can fund, because when we go up to Santa Fe and advocate for dollars, the question is what is the city contributing? What has the city done to make sure that this project is done, completed if we contribute? And what portion is the city contributing? This is an opportunity to show the state of New Mexico also that we're serious about finishing some projects here in the city. And so with that, I will pass it on to Representative Matthews for remarks. So, welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm Marianne Matthews. I'm a state representative from District 27 in the Northeast Heights. I'm here wearing two hats. One is as a resident of the city, someone who loves the city and has lived here for years, looking at a situation where if we're not hair on fire time, we're getting doggone close in terms of public safety and in terms of homelessness. And wearing my second hat, which is as a state representative, the city has the capacity to raise another $110 million without raising taxes in order to help finance important needs like affordable housing and public safety and other projects, quality of life projects and so forth. As a representative, I know that in February, when we go into session, I'm going to be approached by any number of people who are going to come and say, we want you to use capital outlay to fund projects. And in talking with my colleagues, there's simply no way that we can look at a situation where the city leaves $110 million at a low interest rate that doesn't raise taxes on the table and expects us to come up with all the money for the projects that didn't get funded because that $110 million wasn't used. So, we always try to work with the city in partnership, all the representatives and senators do, trying to fund projects and make this a better city. But we need the city to step up at this point and use its capacity to help it solve its problems so that our input and our money can make even a greater difference in where we are on issues like affordable housing and public safety. And at this point, I would like to introduce Finance and Administrative Services Director Renee Martinez.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative. Renee Martinez. I'm the Director of the city's Finance and Administrative Services Department. Just have a few remarks about the financing, and our counselors did a really nice job of really Finance 101 around bonds and how we're financing these projects. So the issue of bonds at this time is advantageous to the city as it takes advantage of very low interest rates. So while interest rates have been trending a bit higher over the past few months, rates still remain at near historical lows. So generally speaking, the higher the rates, then the lower the capacity for project funding, and the lower the rates, the higher capacity for project funding. It's just a reverse relationship. So higher interest rates, if they come in the near future, may reduce the total bonding capacity below the 110 million, as the city does not want to exceed the current 12.9 million in annual general fund gross receipts tax debt service. We want to keep that, don't want to raise that. So just for perspective, for every 0.25% increase in interest rate would reduce capacity for projects by approximately $2 million. So a 1% increase in a rate would then reduce the amount of project funding by 10 million. So just really basically that's the math behind this, and I will be here to stand for questions if you have more detailed questions, and we also have our city economist, Christine Berner, here also if you want to talk generally about GRT trends. Thank you. And next to speak is our AFR Department Deputy Chief, Nathan Mazur.
Thanks. So I was just asked to come today, really talk about how this bond impacts public safety, Albuquerque Fire Rescue in particular. And there's a couple of priorities listed out in here that directly affect public safety for fire rescue. One of those being the southeast part of Albuquerque, Southeast Public Safety Facility, that's near San Mateo and Catherine. The city currently owns land in that area. We have an extremely high call volume in that area, and we really need to be able to expand our services. We need this money to improve our infrastructure and be able to fill that gap. Another major gap that we have is on the west side of Albuquerque. There's money in this bonding package to create a west side public safety facility. Again, improving public safety on the west side for fire and police and closing some of those response gaps for us. We continue to see increased call volume throughout our city. Pre-pandemic, we were kind of level, and we have now recovered from that, and we're continuing to increase in call volume. So it's important that we look forward and invest in the infrastructure so that we can continue to provide our services. So with that, we skipped Chief Griego, so I'm going to go back to Chief Griego.
Thank you. So I just want to kind of paint a picture of what our needs are. And when I say needs for the police department, they're really not nice to haves, and I'll go into that in a little bit. What a lot of people don't realize when you look at the police department, it's actually two buildings. The first part, or the old main, was built in 1970. We outgrew that in 1987, and that is the larger portion of which we refer to as the new side. The majority of people working in that building are civilian staff. We do have detectives that work out of that building, but it is mostly civilian staff. A lot of that had to be added because of the administrative burden of the court-approved settlement agreement. And then we do have some more that we added in the real-time crime center, crime analysts, and records, so we can be more efficient. And as we go on, I'm going to talk about the academy in a minute, but as we hire more officers with the administration's objective, that requires support personnel, and we also have some issues that we need to address at the academy. So when we look at some of these issues, for the main, the roof is old, needs to be replaced. It currently leaks. The HVAC system is not operational the way it should be. I may have an office at 90 degrees next to an office that's 40 degrees. and it's really hard to ask someone to be productive when their office is 90 degrees. So we're hoping a lot of this will increase our efficiency. We have black particles being ejected from the vents, even though we've tried to clean them. We've put filters on them, so there's soot coming out of them. We have about half of the second floor of the old side is unusable because there needs to be some asbestos remediation that goes on, and it has been essentially sealed for a couple of years. And as you can imagine, that is an expensive task. The fire alarm systems, because they're two separate buildings, the fire alarms don't always go off on the old side if they're pulled on the new side, and vice versa. The elevators in both buildings, we increasingly have people getting stuck in those elevators as they start to degrade due to time and age. And the main thing too that we have in the building is sewage backups. It is not an irregular occurrence for our restrooms and plumbing to back up, leak onto the floor, and subsequently leak to the floor below. So, you know, these are some serious issues that we feel we need to address, and we appreciate the administration or the legislative and council's interest in helping us get that done. When we look at the academy, as we try to hire more officers, we're limited by space to some degree. We've used off-site locations and we've repurposed rooms inside the academy, but we are rapidly running out of space. We've added 3 portable buildings, and again, the HVAC system out there needs to be replaced. The ceiling, if you go out there and you look, the ceiling tiles periodically collapse down, sometimes on people. The grid, the metal grid that holds them up, has deteriorated to the point where it no longer supports the tiles in some places. And of course, as we move into a new age of technology, we need upgraded infrastructure at the academy for the computer systems, for the new records management system, and to train personnel how to use those. The locker rooms, we run classes, you know, we've run the largest classes through in the last few years. There's about 6 to 8 shower heads, and trying to get 50 cadets through 6 to 8 shower heads after PT is a little bit challenging. The building envelope itself needs updating, including the windows and all the structure itself. The Southeast Substation. The Southeast Substation was in a significant state of disrepair. I was the commander there before being promoted to deputy chief, and while I was there, part of the exterior wall fell off. And I don't mean just the stucco, I mean the entire exterior wall. We have completed phase 1 of that rehabilitation of that facility. Phase 2 will be coming in December. We're be coming in at the end of this month. And that will include demolition of the extant facility and the completion of the phase 1 that was there. Again, we sincerely appreciate council's efforts and legislation's efforts in giving us the ability to remediate those concerns. The next person will be Family and Community Services Deputy Director Lisa Huval.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So I'm here a little bit to talk about the housing part of this bill. We know that even before the pandemic that many families in our community here in Albuquerque were struggling to find safe, good quality housing that they could afford. At least 2,000 renter households and at least 20,000 renter households and at least 12,000 households that own their homes are severely cost burdened, which means that every month they are paying more than 50% of their incomes towards the housing costs. And this situation is really the worst for families in our community with very low incomes, people that are at or below 30% of the area median income. For these folks, there's a gap of about 15,000 rental units that are affordable. And unfortunately, the evidence is that that gap continues to grow. With COVID, even more families are struggling, both because they have been economically impacted by COVID and also because we're really seeing a tightening rental market and increasing housing prices that makes it harder than ever to find housing that low and moderate income families can afford. Recognizing this, the City, County, UNM Homeless Coordinating Council has identified additional funding for the production of affordable rental housing as one of our high-impact strategies for addressing homelessness in our community. So that's why we are excited that this bill allocates $25.6 million to develop housing in Albuquerque. These funds can be used to do things like acquire existing properties and renovate those properties and then rent them to low and moderate income families to make sure that they have a safe place to stay. Could also potentially be used to acquire land and then construct new housing on that property as well. Either way, we know that this money will help us produce more homes for families in our community who need homes that they can afford. We also know that it's important to address gaps across the whole housing spectrum, and that includes helping people who are struggling with substance abuse to make sure that they have a safe short-term place to stay while working on longer-term housing options. So that's why, as part of this bill, some of this $25.6 million could also be used to help develop a sobering center as well. So in closing, we are really excited about this opportunity to invest in safe and affordable housing for families in our community. Thank you.
Well, I hope that answered a lot of the questions. I just want to say a couple more things, that people want to see their tax dollars go to work to do something for them. They want to see their tax dollars being used on the things they're asking for help about. This will do that. This will make sure that everyone, whether they're progressive, conservative, or anyone in between, this is a true nonpartisan bill that is designed to truly help Albuquerque in a reduction of crime, homelessness, and finishing projects throughout the city that will benefit communities all around. I sincerely thank my co-sponsor, Councilor Pena. I sincerely thank Representative Matthews and the administration for collaborating on this idea. What started as an idea of how to truly leverage some funding to finish one project in my district has turned into something that will benefit the entire city. And I'm very proud of this, and I'm truly hoping that we will be able to get support from the council on Monday. And now I stand for any questions. It's weird that I get to say that.
So this bill, is this do you anticipate this being like an all or nothing kind of thing? Like, are you going to be able to pick and choose some projects to do? Like, let's say you guys don't agree with everything. Can you cut some things out, or is it all?
I mean, this bill is going to require a vote of at least 7 of the 9 councilors in order to pass. I am going to say that I anticipate some amendments coming forward on Monday's meeting, if not before. It's not necessarily an all or nothing. It just depends. If amendments come through, that will take 5 votes to pass them, and then we will vote on the final bill as amended.
Does this have the support of the administration?
Yes, this does have the support of the administration. So again, what started as an idea by myself, then turned into a collaboration with Councilor Pena, and then eventually revolved or turned into an opportunity of saying, administration, are we on the right track so that we can try to streamline this and make sure that we're not going to end up in a contentious battle over something that has good intentions for everyone.
Councilor-elect Sanchez has said that he should be sworn in for city charter, their interpretation of it, and he says it has to do with this bond. What's your take on it? Do you think that Councilor Sanchez should be sworn into office, considering that by charter he's replacing someone who was appointed?
Right, so I anticipated that question coming up, but I think that truly that's above my pay grade, and this is why we have city legal and the city clerk, and they're the ones that need to handle this because that's something that I am not experienced with in order to make a decision on it.
You voted to take the stadium to a bond when you didn't have to. Why not, or to a vote when you didn't have to? Why not take this to a vote?
Actually, to clarify, I co-sponsored the bill to put this to a vote, but I also voted against it.
You voted, okay. And you were there to support Keller for the news conference, correct? For the stadium bond, correct?
Yes, I was there. I thought that originally with a $50 million project, voters should be able to decide on something like that, which is also why this bill has been drafted with projects that have been prioritized in the past and that have these priorities in mind that the citizens of Albuquerque have been talking about.
So when you guys were developing the bond package that went on the November 2nd ballot, there was a lot of discussion about affordable housing and specifically whether there was enough money for that vote. And I believe you in particular said you didn't want to put more money in that bond because you didn't think the city was spending what it had in place. How do you justify the change from you don't want to put more money in the November bond, but now you want to add $25 million?
So I can justify it quite easily in that at that point in time, that was for the Workforce Housing Trust Fund, which has been fully funded and then some. And while I support the idea of the Workforce Housing Trust Fund, I think that we need to get creative about other avenues for affordable housing in Albuquerque as well, because it's not going to be one solution that's going to get us out of the predicament that we're in.
I'm going to pose the same question to Councilor Pena
Sure.
in reference to Councilor Sanchez. Do you believe that he should be sworn in, or excuse me, Councilor-elect Sanchez, that he should be sworn in? He's a fellow West Side councilor to you. And does this bond have anything to do with him not being sworn in?
Does the bond have anything to do with him not being sworn in? I think that if he was actually sworn in, he would support the projects because this is kind of one of the first times in a long time that we actually get some real monies to the West Side. So I think if he was put into office now, he would actually support the bond. That's just my perception of it. But again, what Councilor Bassan said, it's above my pay grade. I think the Secretary of State hasn't certified the election yet, is what I'm hearing. So until she does, then that decision will be made at that point. And then just to add to what you had said, Jessica, I mean, just to clarify, also what and reiterate what Councilor Bassan said is that, you know, we're talking about workforce housing money, and I think it's just really important to say the trust fund money initially. So when we fully funded that, sometimes I think the narrative that gets out there is about the workforce housing trust fund, but there's so many more projects that we can address because that's for one specific type of project. So when we're talking affordable housing, we have to kind of just be careful on what type of affordable housing we're talking about because we have a tremendous need in our community, and the amount of money that's put into the larger void is small in comparison to what we need to be investing, as Deputy Director had stated.
I guess I have a question about that maybe for Lisa. The Workforce Housing Trust Fund, how restrictive is that? Can you use that to buy land? Can you use that to buy properties? Can you use that to buy?
Yes, the Workforce Housing Trust Fund is governed, or kind of the rules are set by the Workforce Housing Trust Fund Ordinance. And you can use workforce housing dollars to fund a range of housing activities, land acquisition, new construction, acquisition, rehab. But there are some restrictions with the Workforce Housing Trust Funds. There's definitely some set parameters. So Councilor Pena and Councilor Bassan are correct that these housing bonds that we're talking about today would be a more flexible pot of money.
A financing question. So you guys have been spending $12.9 million a year on paying off GRT bonds for capital projects. That would go down to $8 million starting July. Is that right? If this doesn't pass?
I don't have the schedule with me right now, but that sounds about right.
And so right now you have this flexibility of that $4+ million that could go to paying off this debt or could go to operations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What we heard about new fire station, we heard about the swimming pool in the bond, we heard about renovations to the main, which has been a 2-decade conversation. What else is on there on the bond that was not mentioned?
So just for easy use, so for everybody watching and for all of you, page 20 of the ordinance is where the meat is, and to have the complete list of what's being proposed at this time, which could of course be amended. But you know, there's parks: Loma Linda Park, Loma Linda Community Center, Phil Chacon Park, Cibola Loop Multi-Generational Center, soccer facilities on the west side that are different than a stadium. We truly looked at this. There's the south. We heard about some of the other ones right on the east. It would finish out Los Altos Park in the middle of town. There's a pump track that's being done, and this would actually finalize that project. So truly, we were looking at making sure that we look throughout all of the city and all of the districts to find out what we could do to make this beneficial to everyone in Albuquerque again, not just one district more than the other.
For each of those projects, do you have a list of how much money is already in hand for each of them? And
Well,
will you be adding to?
some of them, yes, some of them are already in phases. Some of them are still accumulating funding. So there is a list. I don't necessarily have it on me right now, of course, but yes.
Someone give me that with how much is already in place and how much the project would cost, so how much this
I'll look into making sure that we can see what we can do to get that to you.
Counselor, if there's any issues, I mean, you said that multiple times this is basically your brainchild. If there's any issues going along any forward, whether it be legality issues or amendments, what are you willing to do to get this passed on Monday, and or what are you willing to do after if it's not?
Well, I mean, as with any brainchild, thank you for calling it that, but as with anything like that, I mean, of course, I hope that the intentions of this bill will be seen and valued by the other counselors, but if they do want to change things, if they're sensible, I'm open to it. I think that that's the way we should operate. We should compromise, and we should find a way to benefit our districts and their priorities. I think that I did a good job of doing that, but at the same time, I'm certainly not a counselor in each of these districts. I have tried to reach out to the counselors to find out what their priorities were and if there was any needed changes to exist. So I'm hoping that if they do amend it and it makes sense, that we can all come to an agreement on it. And I'm not one to really operate with grudges, so I'm hoping that as we move forward, we can try to do what's best for the city. But I certainly think something is better than nothing, especially when we're not going to be creating a bigger problem for Albuquerque by using these funds, but we will actually be able to benefit it.
And then if it doesn't go through on Monday, do you have a deadline after that you're willing to get it done, or holidays or anything that where people go away and
Well,
start to hear?
we have 2 meetings left in December, so if it gets deferred, then it would get deferred, but I'm hoping that we can actually come to some consensus this coming Monday.
You mentioned at the beginning that like your 3 big branches for this were projects, crime, and homelessness. And I haven't been able to read the bill, but it sounds like the main homelessness sector that is this affordable housing project. Is there anything in there about helping the current homeless population with this affordable housing be helping them at all, or is this mainly to prevent more people from homeless?
I personally expected to do both, but I'm going to have Deputy Director Lisa Huval come back up.
Yes, I think the main component of the bill that addresses homelessness is the housing, because that is the main need of people experiencing homelessness is housing, high quality housing that they can afford, as well as the sobering center. We know that some, not all, but some folks experiencing homelessness are struggling with substance abuse, and this sobering center will provide a resource for them.
And sorry, I'm not familiar with the serving center. Is this a new project or is this something that's already in place?
No, this would be a new project. It doesn't currently exist.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming today. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm homeless. It's kind of hard to stay in Westside shelter. When they quarantine you to stay there 10 days, I work. I got a job. They can stay there for 10 days and I lost my job. What's
Again, another great question for Deputy Director.
No, you're okay. I'm sorry, sir. I had a little trouble hearing. Did you ask me why did you have to stay at the West Side shelter for 10 days?
when somebody tests positive?
Yes.
We can't leave this facility.
Right.
So they're holding us against our will to be free.
Right. Well, yeah, I can address that, and I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one too. But we are our West Side Emergency Housing Center is our the city's largest emergency shelter located on the west side of town. We are handling COVID positive cases out there, just like everywhere else in New Mexico. And when there is a area that where there is a COVID case, we do test folks. and ask folks to isolate just like any of us would have to isolate if we had an exposure. I do want to clarify, no one's held against their will. People are able to leave the shelter if they don't want to isolate, but I know it is a difficult situation, as it is everywhere for everyone dealing with COVID right now.
So I live on the streets of Compton.
Yeah. Sir, I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one after this.
We can definitely keep talking too, but for the sake of the actual press conference too, thank you all so much for being here today.